History records Wu Zetian as both a hero and a villain. According to some sources, she was a ruthless tyrant who sacrificed even her own children without batting an eye to others. She was one of China's greatest reformers, a visionary who opened the doors of government to women and rewarded talent based on merit, not nobility. This dilemma elevates her story beyond a mere historical event. It transforms it into one of history's greatest debates on justice. So who was Wu Zetian really? Was she a cruel tyrant, or a genius distorted by history? To answer this question, we must go back to 7th century China, to the most glorious days of the Tang dynasty. The capital Chang'an was one of the most populous and wealthy cities in the world at that time. People from different cultures, from Persian merchants to Indian monks, roamed its cosmopolitan markets, and the trade in silk and spices brought great wealth to the empire. The palace was the center of splendor. Hundreds of concubines, officials, eunuchs, princes, and princesses, and, of course, the emperor at the heart of it all. It was at the very bottom of this vast hierarchy that the story of Wu Zetian began, as an ordinary concubine. Wu Zetian was born in 624 AD. Although her family was not of the highest aristocratic rank, they came from a respectable and educated background. She learned to read and write at a young age and developed a passion for poetry and history. These qualities set her apart from the thousands of young girls who entered the palace. At just 13 years old, she entered Emperor Taizong's harem. Normally, this would have meant her life would fade away as an ordinary concubine. But Wu charted a very different course with her intelligence and ambition. While most women in the palace sought to stand out solely through their beauty, Wu Zetian adopted a different approach. She did not approach Emperor Taizong solely through her charm. She conversed with him about history and literature, and offered her opinions on state affairs. According to some accounts, she even rose to the position of serving as the emperor's secretary for a time. Her intelligence and wisdom saved her from being just an ordinary concubine. However, the event that truly changed her fate was her secret love affair with the emperor's son, Prince Lizi. Lizi would ascend the throne years later and be known as Emperor Gaozong, but in those days, such a relationship was strictly forbidden, because the emperor's concubines were not allowed to have relationships with princes. For Wu Zetian, Taizong's favorite, this was a scandal that could have resulted in death. Yet Wu took the risk, perhaps for love, perhaps because she foresaw the future. But this forbidden bond became a bridge that would later change the fate of all China. When Taizong died in 649, Wu Zetian's life entered a dark period. According to tradition, the emperor's concubines were confined to monasteries, so they would not be with other men. Wu was also sent to a Buddhist monastery with her head shaved. For most concubines, this was the final chapter of their lives. But Wu's story did not end there, because the person now on the throne was Prince Li Zhou, who had been in love with her and his youth emperor, Gaozong. Wu Zetian did not waste the years she spent in the monastery. She studied religious teachings and waited patiently, and finally, at the emperor's request, she was summoned back to the palace. This defied tradition. A concubine could not be recalled from the monastery to become the emperor's wife again. Wu's return caused a major scandal in the palace. However, this reversal also upset the balance of power within the palace. Gaozong's official wife, Empress Wang, was already the legitimate heir to the throne. She also had another powerful rival, named Consort Zhou. Empress Wang and Consort Zhou were initially at odds with each other, but with Wu's rise, they joined forces to try to stop him. The palace was now not just a love triangle. It was also the arena of a major struggle for the throne. Wu Zetian once again demonstrated her intelligence and determination. In 654, she gave birth to a baby girl. Tragically, however, the infant died shortly thereafter, under mysterious circumstances. Wu wasted no time in accusing Empress Wang. "She killed my baby out of jealousy," she declared, drawing the emperor's wrath upon Wang. Empress Wang's reputation was destroyed. while Wu gained power. Here, historians are divided. According to some sources, Wu had indeed lost her baby and blamed her rival in anger. But others suggest a darker possibility, that Wu Zetian killed her baby herself and pinned the blame on Wang. Whichever is true, this incident accelerated Wu's rise. Her rivals were eliminated one by one, and Wu Zetian became Gaozong's official wife, that is, his empress. Wu was now rising to the pinnacle of power not only through her intelligence, but also through her strategic moves. But this was only the beginning for her. For Wu Zetian's sights were set not merely on becoming empress, but on taking the fate of China into her own hands. Wu Zetian was no longer just the emperor's mistress. She was the official empress. This rise was the result of her intelligence and ruthless strategies. However, the power struggle within the palace was not over. Emperor Gaozong's health was deteriorating, and due to headaches and strokes, he was gradually withdrawing from state affairs. It was this void that Wu began to fill. She signed state documents on the emperor's behalf, attended meetings with ministers, and made critical decisions herself. The conservative wing of the palace was uncomfortable with this. Zhongsun Wuji, one of the most powerful viziers, did everything in his power to stop Wu's rise. In his view, Wu Zetian was merely the emperor's father's former concubine, nothing more than an illicit affair. However, Wu had used her intelligence to establish a powerful intelligence network within the palace. She distributed gifts to servants, gathered the secrets of the concubines, and used the whispers to her advantage. She was no longer just the emperor's wife, but a shadow ruler who held the invisible strings of the palace. Sometime later, Wu Zetian gave birth to a son for Gaozong Li Hong. This birth completely altered the balance of power within the palace. For now, Wu was no longer just a woman. She was the one who had given birth to the future of the throne. According to legend, shortly thereafter, a young princess, whom Gaozong loved dearly, died mysteriously. Rumors immediately spread. Wu Zetian even killed her own daughter to frame her rivals. While some chronicles describe this event in detail, others make no mention of it. Whatever the truth may be, the emperor did not hold Wu responsible for this tragedy. Instead, he turned his attention to Empress Wang. In 655, a major crisis erupted in the palace. Emperor Gaozong announced his intention to make Wu Zetian the official empress. This decision sparked a major rebellion among the ministers. The highest-ranking officials in the palace tried to block Wu by reminding everyone that Wang had committed no crime and had been chosen by Taizong. Even the vizier Chu Suliang defied the emperor, saying, "Your Majesty, Empress Wang is innocent. Deposing her and replacing her with your father's concubine is a great disgrace to the state." As these words echoed through the palace hall, Wu Zetian stepped out of the shadows and shouted boldly, "Then why don't you execute him immediately?" The palace fell silent. Never before had a concubine, let alone a woman, argued so fiercely with the ministers. Wu's courage was proof of how far she was willing to go. Finally, Gaozong made his decision. Empress Wang and her rival, consort Zhou, were accused and dismissed from their posts. Their families were exiled. According to legend, Wu had these two rivals tortured to death. This event was one of the greatest turning points in Chinese history. Wu Zetian was now not only the emperor's wife, but also the sole ruler of the empire. She had changed the fate of women who had remained in the shadow of men and ascended to the pinnacle of power in her own right. But her rise was not limited to palace intrigues. Wu Zetian launched radical reforms to consolidate her power. One of her biggest steps was to break the power of aristocratic families and introduce a new merit-based system. Traditionally, government positions were given to noble families. Wu, however, reorganized the imperial examinations, allowing talented individuals from the common people to enter government ranks. This both won the support of the people and drew the wrath of the aristocrats. She also pioneered the participation of women in government positions. Female advisors and officials began to appear in the palace. In a male-dominated system, these steps were revolutionary. Wu Zetian demonstrated not only her own power, but the potential of all women. His reforms had an impact, not only in politics, but also in the economy. Wu established military outposts to ensure the security of the Silk Road. Thus, trade continued uninterrupted, and merchants and envoys from the west flocked to the capital Chang'an. The city became one of the world's most cosmopolitan centers. Along with silk and spices, ideas, religions, and art also passed through here, enriching China. Wu Zetian also used Buddhism as a political force. She had temples built throughout the empire, winning the affection of the people. The massive Vairocana Buddha statue in the Longmen Caves was constructed on her orders. According to legend, the statue's face was inspired by Wu's own face. This was a symbol of her efforts to establish divine authority. During these years, Wu Zetian's power had reached its peak. Even male ministers bowed before her and obeyed her commands. But at the same time, her ruthlessness was legendary. She established a secret police force to monitor her rivals and silenced her opponents through torture. Wu Zetian thus cemented her place in Chinese history as both a reformist leader and a feared tyrant. Wu Zetian was now effectively the sole power ruling China. As Emperor Gaozong's illness progressed, all state decisions were made by her. Rumors spread throughout the palace. China is ruled by a two-headed government, but the real head is Wu Zetian. These sarcastic remarks actually reflected the truth, for Wu was not only empress, but also the first shadow emperor in Chinese history. Opponents were either exiled or executed. Stories about Wu Zetian's cruelty spread rapidly. According to some sources, she had her rivals tortured to death. She even had some of them have their arms and legs cut off and thrown into wine barrels. Whether this is true or not is unknown, but what is certain is that she tolerated no obstacles to her power. Male emperors had resorted to the same methods for centuries, but Wu's, being a woman, made her every move seem like an even greater scandal. After consolidating his power, Wu continued with his reforms. He further developed the imperial examinations to break the monopoly of aristocratic families. Talented individuals from among peasants, artisans, and even merchants' children could now enter the ranks of the state. This was a major change in Chinese society. For talented people who were not of noble birth, Wu had become a symbol of hope. Women's status also rose. Wu appointed female advisors to the court. He even promoted some women to high government positions. This was a revolution that traditionalist men found difficult to accept. It showed that women could be found not only in the harem, but also among those who governed the state. In 683, Gaozong died. There were now no obstacles left in front of Wu Zetian. First, her young sons ascended the throne, but none of them could resist their mother's authority. Wu became the absolute ruler of the state, with the title Empress Dowager. And in 690, she took a historic step. Wu Zetian officially proclaimed herself emperor. She ended the Temps dynasty and founded the Zhou dynasty. For the first and only time in Chinese history, a woman ascended the imperial throne under her own name. This was an unprecedented event not only for China, but also for world history. As hundreds of ministers knelt before her in the throne room, Wu Zetian sat alone on the golden throne. The power that men had held for centuries was now in the hands of a woman. That moment was a turning point that changed the course of history. During his reign, China experienced a remarkably stable period. Taxes were regulated, borders were secured, and the people began to live in prosperity. Silk Road trade reached its peak. The city of Chang'an, with a population approaching 2 million, became the world's most populous and cosmopolitan center. Foreign envoys, merchants, and missionaries flocked to this city. Wu Zetian's religious policies also increased her power. She made Buddhism the state's most important religion. She had temples built and supported monks. The massive Vairocana Buddha statue in the Longmen Caves elevated her authority to a divine level. According to legend, the statue's face was modeled after Wu's own face. This made her appear as a divine figure in the eyes of the people. Architecture was another field where Wu's power was on display. Completed in just 3 years, the massive damming palace was one of the most magnificent structures ever built in China up to that point. Foreign envoys could not hide their admiration at the grandeur of the Danfeng Gate. This palace declared that Wu Zetian was not only a ruler, but also a symbol of power and wealth. However, there was also a dark side to Wu's rule. The secret police expanded, and opponents were interrogated in prisons. He even viewed some of his own sons as threats. He accused his son Li Xian of treason, exiled him, and ultimately drove him to suicide. As she grew older, Wu Zetian broke another traditional taboo. While male emperors had hundreds of concubines, she took young and handsome male lovers. The most famous were the Zhou brothers. These 2 brothers were both her lovers and her advisors. They were given important positions in the palace. Historians described this situation as a major scandal. They mocked it as an old woman cavorting with young men. Yet the harems of elderly emperors, filled with young concubines, had never been questioned. When Wu Zetian claimed for herself the privileges granted to men, society was horrified. In 704, a coup took place in the palace. The guards killed the Zhang brothers, and Wu was forced to abdicate the throne. Her son Zhongzong, whom she had deposed years earlier, returned to the throne. Wu Zetian withdrew to a remote corner of the palace. She was now an old and sick woman. She spent her final days in solitude. In 705, at the age of 81, she passed away. Unlike other emperors, her tomb was left unmarked. Neither her title nor her achievements were carved in stone. It was as if even history did not know how to judge her. Wu Zetian is remembered as both a powerful reformer and a ruthless tyrant. Methods considered normal when practiced by men were deemed scandalous when she employed them. Her true legacy lies here, demonstrating that women could wield power, desire, and strength just as much as men. That is why her name is still debated. To some, she is a hero. To others, a sinner. But one thing is certain, she continues to live on as one of history's unforgettable figures.